Today is June 22nd, and we're about 3 weeks away from UFC 330, the next UFC numbered event. And I think this is going to be the first event where stacking the White House card, stacking UFC 329 is going to catch up to the UFC. And this is something we figured that was going to happen because this is not a very good card for a numbered event. My name is James Lynch. Let's have a quick look at this event. One of the questions I keep getting asked in my live chat is, hey, James, are you hearing they're going to add anything to this card? And the answer is no. Maybe they do between now and then, but again, 3 weeks from now, doesn't seem like we're going to get another big fight added to this event. And look, let's start at the top of this card. This title fight's great. Islam and Ian Gary, no complaints here. You know, you could have gone with Morales, Ian Gary. I don't have an issue with who's fighting Islam next, really. I think either one would have been fine. Totally fine with Ian Gary getting a title shot. Adding the women's title fight in here, totally fine with that too, right? We haven't had a women's title fight this entire year. We were supposed to have Kayla Harrison and Amanda Nunes back in January. That got scrapped. We haven't had a title fight since, which is crazy because we're talking about the midway point of the year. In fact, past the midway point of the year, we haven't had a single women's title fight. So I get it that they're putting this fight together with Mackenzie Dern and Jillian Robertson. Totally fine with that. Even Aaron Blanchfield and Jasmine's going to be a big fight for the flyweight division. Not something that I think people are like, super excited about as far as the matchup goes, but it is an important fight for the flyweight division here. Is it numbered, event worthy? Is it pay-per-view worthy in terms of it being on the main card? That's up for debate, but it's still a quality fight. Don't even really have an issue with this being on here, but that's it. If you look at the rest of the card right now, they may end up having to move one of these fights to the main card. And if you look at some of the matchmaking here, Barbosa, Ribovics, it's kind of a fun fight, but that's not really like a pay-per-view fight. Vicente Luque's on the tail end of his career. Tresean Gore hasn't had a ton of success in the UFC. Mansour Abdul Malik is kind of getting an easier matchup here, a bounce back fight from his last loss. They obviously like him. That's how I kind of look at this fight. Jeremiah Wells and Orabai, again, same thing. They're trying to build up Orabai a little bit. Jeff Neal and Chitty will be a fun fight. Two veterans kind of going together. Same thing with Neil Magny and Ramiz. You got the return of Jalen Turner, for some reason is fighting Fernandez. I don't know why. I don't know what they're doing with Jalen Turner there. Fun one in the flyweight division with Johnson and Ocha, and then Tobias and Fernando opening up the card. But this looks like, if you take out these two title fights, this looks like a fight night card. Am I wrong about this, guys? You let me know in the comments, but this is something that the UFC has been doing the last couple of years where they'll make a numbered event. And actually in this case, I don't even think they had any canceled fights. Yeah, they didn't. I was going to say, sometimes what'll happen is fights will get canceled and then the UFC doesn't replace it. Prime example, Amanda Nunes, Kayla Harrison on that big Paramount debut. They didn't replace the fight. Not that they should have. I think they should still make that fight together, but they didn't put like a replacement fight on there. If you go back years ago, the UFC used to do this on a regular basis. If they lost a big fight, they would, find someone on short notice and make a big matchup and put it together. And you just don't see them do that anymore. And I think, and this is something I talk about on the channel and people don't like it, but the UFC can do no wrong crowd. You know who I'm talking about? The people that watch every single Apex event, every single event from the start of the prelims till the end and think the UFC is the best product it's ever been. Will defend this and they'll be like, well, you'd be watching anyways. Yeah, I am going to watch this card, but that doesn't mean we can't criticize it. And I think the UFC is taking advantage of their audience. I think they know that people are going to tune into the title fight and they don't really care to beef up the card that much, to be honest. The UFC has a huge roster. They don't typically pull roster fighters together and make a big fight. Now, look, I could be totally wrong, and maybe in the next couple days or next week or whatever, maybe they do add a big fight. But traditionally, that hasn't been the case with the UFC. They don't typically put a big fight on the UFC with less than a couple weeks notice, right? It's 3 weeks, I guess, like I was saying here. I don't see it happening. And like I said, I have not heard that they're going to add any other big fights to this card. And I realize that this is not a pay-per-view anymore. It is for, some of us here in Canada, well, all of us here in Canada and other regions as well. You still have to pay for these events, which I do. I got to pay $70 for this. But even so, the numbered events should be quality events, and I just don't see a lot of quality here. Like I said, no issue with these three fights. It's after that where you're kind of losing me here, and this looks like a fight night card that is just sort of run-of-the-mill here. So I just, again, I think there should be a little bit more outrage at this on the UFC. They've been doing this for so long where, again, they will just rely on people tuning into like one or two fights, and they don't care about the rest of the card. And I think this could be avoidable. And I've talked about this in other videos where, like, if they just, skip some of the cards or combine the cards together, you could have some more quality matchups. Let's take a quick example. This weekend's card, the Abu Dhabi card. Honestly, for an Abu Dhabi card, it's not that strong. Steve Erceg and Temirov is the co-main event. Is that really co-main event worthy? I don't believe that. I think, it's going to be a fun fight. Is that co-main event worthy? No, I don't think so. You got Dulatov. I talked about this on Monday in a complete squash match. This is another issue I have with the UFC with some of the matchmaking. Just an obvious fight here. Dulatov's going to win. He's a minus 750 favorite. What are we doing? How does this happen in the UFC where you have favorites that are so heavily favored on a card against, the UFC is supposed to be the best promotion in the world, and we're getting squash matches like this. Maybe Turman pulls it off. I don't know, but he's been out since 2023. This looks to me like a fight that's going to make Dulatov look really good here. Coming off 3 losses, and he's fighting this up-and-comer that everyone likes who's 12-1. This looks like kind of a setup fight, if I'm being honest. Not setup in that it's fixed, but they're being very generous here to Dulatov as far as the matchmaking. I'm not really that thrilled about this card either. It's okay for a fight night card, but for the Abu Dhabi standard they've had before, this is one of the weaker cards they've had. And obviously we lost the original main event, which was Ankalaev and Cleo Roundtree. Bogdan, I think, is a fine replacement, but even so, like, as many people picking Bogdan in this spot, I think Ankalaev probably wins this. I think this is too much too soon here for Bogdan. We'll find out. Again, upsets have happened. There's been a lot of them this year. But imagine if you pulled off some of these fights from this card and put it on, 330. Just as a quick example, like if you put an Ankalaev and Gustav on, 330 as like one of the main card fights, I'd be totally fine with that. You can even move like a, Valter Walker and Thomas Peterson fight, which will be a fun one. This is what I'm saying. Like, they could be spreading the wealth a little bit more and making these cards a little bit better. We can even go through some of the other cards that are coming up here, right? Even Medic Rodriguez, right? You take some of the fights from here. I like that fight. I think that's awesome. Imagine putting Jan Blachowicz and Navajo Sterling on UFC 330, right? I know for the region, it makes more sense having Jan on an international card, but I'm just saying they could spread the wealth a little bit. And this card also looks like a fight night, Serbia card, like on the regional scene for the most part, right? Like there's a lot of names on here that fans are not familiar with, or they're fights that just aren't that compelling. So we kind of figured this though, like I said, when the UFC, despite them having such a big roster, whenever they stack the deck, and we saw this a couple years ago with UFC 300, where they made every fight great, and then beyond that, it kind of suffered a bit. I forget which pay-per-view it was, but if you look at UFC 300, I think 301 was kind of weak here, right? So obviously, Dana talked about it, and he said every fight on here could be a main event, which he was right about, right? I mean, all these fights were good, right? But let's look at 301 after that. It was a bit of a tough card. And this is the problem. The UFC just doesn't do a good enough job. So yeah, it was Pantoja Ursag. Aldo Martinez was fun, but then after that, it's kind of like, eh. And this was back when it was a pay-per-view. So kind of my point is, you're going to start to see some of these cards coming up here be a lot more weaker because the UFC just doesn't, I think they take advantage of the audience. They don't care about making cards strong. I think they want to put 1 or 2 good fights on, and then it doesn't matter what the rest of the card looks like because they know people will tune in. And again, you've got people and their bleeding hearts defending every decision the UFC makes, but I watched the UFC in a time, and I think there's a lot of you watching this video remember a time when the UFC used to make cards very quality. They used to put the effort in and make sure that the main card, especially for a numbered event, was solid. And I just feel like they're not doing that now. And again, I'll say it one more time. There could be a world where they do put one more big fight on here, but I'm not hearing it. And if you look at how the UFC's done their matchmaking the last little bit, they haven't really had a habit of doing that. I think the last like kind of interesting fight they made, I feel like King Green and Terrence McKinney was a bit of a late add to UFC 329, but that rarely happens, guys. Usually it's like, they're just like, you'll tune in. Doesn't matter what the rest of the card's like. So if I had to guess right now as the card stands, they might put, trying to figure out what fight they would put on the main card. They might put Jeff Neal and Chitty on the main card just because of the vet. Neal's a decent name. I could see them putting it on there, and maybe they put Mansour and Stolfus just because I know that's going to be a highlight, or maybe they put Barbosa and Robivics. But yeah, I would say Neal and Chitty would be the candidate for me to be on this main card. But yeah, I don't think this is a good card. I think we need to be a little bit more vocal about this with fans, especially with the Paramount era. They got this huge deal now. Is it too much to ask for more quality cards? I just don't think this is up to par for what the UFC's been doing. And again, I understand they stacked, like I said, the White House and 329, but spread the wealth a little bit. Maybe don't do a fight night every week and maybe combine some of these cards. That would be my recommendation here to make these cards a little bit stronger. So yeah, that's my thoughts. UFC 330 needs a ton of work, and I don't think they're going to put the work in to make it better. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this is a weak card? Again, it's not the worst numbered event they've ever had, but I'm just saying, like, you can't add a couple more big fights to this card. That's all I'm asking for here. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.